In my last video, I laid out a series of coincidences surrounding Tommaso Cioni: the 4-hour window, the ownership behavior on the porch, the nitrile gloves, the power of attorney signed 8 months before his mother-in-law vanished, the FBI returning to his home 5 separate times. That video reached a lot of people, and it raised a question I deliberately did not answer. If Tommaso Cioni planned this, he did not execute it alone. The man in the FBI doorbell footage is described as 5'9" to 5'10" with an average build. Tommaso Cioni is taller than that. He does not match. That is the single biggest hole in the theory I presented, and I left it open on purpose, because I was still pulling records. I have now been through the Pima County court system, property filings, band archives, social media accounts dating back to 2007, and what I found is a name that keeps appearing next to Tommaso Cioni's. A name attached to felony convictions for burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. A man who lives in the Tucson area, minutes from Nancy Guthrie's home. A man who fits the physical description the FBI released. This video is about that man. His name is Dominic Aaron Lee Evans, and his connection to this case goes deeper than anyone has reported. It starts with a Craigslist ad. In April of 2007, 3 men in Tucson, Arizona found each other through the most mundane channels imaginable. Dominic Evans, a drummer, met guitarist Walter I. Goncalves Jr. through a Craigslist posting. Tommaso Cioni, who had moved to the United States from Tuscany, Italy, just the year before, responded to an ad in the Tucson Weekly. They formed a band. They called it Early Black, indie post-punk, shoegaze and grunge influences, the kind of music that fills small venues in college towns and never quite breaks through to the mainstream. Dominic handled drums, Tommaso played bass and sang. Goncalves played guitar and also contributed vocals. They recorded their debut album at Loveland Studios in Tucson and released it in 2010 to positive local reviews in the Tucson Weekly. They played shows in Tucson, Phoenix, and Flagstaff. They had a local following. They never made it big. The name of that debut album is Life, Love, Love, Murder. I need to pause here because I do not want to sensationalize that title. Plenty of bands name albums with dark or provocative language. It does not mean anything by itself. But in the context of what happened to Nancy Guthrie, in the context of the man who played on that record, now being scrutinized by online investigators for his potential connection to a kidnapping, the title sits differently than it did in 2010. You do not need me to tell you why. You can hear it for yourself. What matters more than the album title is what the band represents. A nearly 2-decade friendship between Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans. They did not grow up together. They did not go to school together. They were not childhood friends reconnecting. They were strangers who found each other through classified ads in 2007 and built a relationship through music, rehearsals, recording sessions, and live shows across Arizona. By the time Nancy Guthrie disappeared in January of 2026, Tommaso and Dominic had known each other for 19 years. 19 years is not a casual acquaintance. That is a deep, sustained relationship. The kind of relationship where you know someone's habits, their financial situation, their capabilities, their weaknesses. You know what they are willing to do and what they are not willing to do. You know what they need. And in a case where investigators are actively considering the possibility that the man on the porch did not act alone, 19 years of trust between 2 men is not background noise. It is infrastructure. Tommaso married Annie Guthrie in September of 2006, 1 year before Early Black was formed. That means, for the entire duration of his relationship with Dominic Evans, Tommaso has been a member of the Guthrie family. Every conversation between Tommaso and Dominic over those 19 years happened in the context of Tommaso's marriage to Nancy Guthrie's daughter. Dominic would have known about the family. He would have known about Savannah. He would have known about the house in the Catalina foothills. Not because he was conducting surveillance, but because that is what happens when you are close friends with someone for nearly 2 decades. Their life becomes familiar to you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think by the end of this video, because everything I am about to show you has not been covered anywhere else in this level of detail. Let us continue. Dominic Aaron Lee Evans has a criminal record in Pima County, Arizona. The charges include felony burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, and DUI. This information was publicized by an investigative account on X, formerly Twitter, called @JLR Investigates, who posted a screenshot of court records from the Arizona Pima County court system. Multiple media outlets subsequently reported on this criminal history. I need to walk through what those charges mean individually, because the specific crimes matter enormously in the context of this case. Burglary. In Arizona, burglary is defined as entering or remaining unlawfully in a structure with the intent to commit a felony or theft. It is not about stealing property from a store. It is about entering a place you are not supposed to be. A home, a building, a residence. The legal definition of burglary maps almost perfectly onto what happened at Nancy Guthrie's house on the night of February 1st. Someone entered her home unlawfully with the intent to commit a crime. Robbery. Robbery differs from theft because it involves force or the threat of force against another person. It is not a passive crime. It requires confrontation. It requires a willingness to face another human being and take something from them by intimidation or violence. Whoever entered Nancy Guthrie's home that night did not simply take an object. They took a person. An 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and limited mobility. That requires a specific psychological threshold. The willingness to physically confront and overpower another human being. Most people do not have that threshold. Someone with a robbery conviction has already crossed it. Theft and embezzlement. These are financial crimes. They suggest a pattern of taking what does not belong to you and a comfort with deception over extended periods. Embezzlement in particular requires a position of trust. You cannot embezzle from someone who does not trust you with their resources. Now think about the profile of the man on Nancy Guthrie's porch. Someone who entered a home in the middle of the night. Someone who confronted an elderly woman and physically removed her from her residence. Someone who did all of this while wearing discount gear and a mask, suggesting a level of criminal familiarity, but not professional sophistication. That profile does not fit a 15-year AP biology teacher who studies lizards and makes homemade pasta. But it fits a man with felony convictions for burglary and robbery with disturbing precision. In my last video, I introduced the theory that this crime was committed by two people, an architect and an operative. The architect is the person who planned the crime. They know the house. They know the camera system. They know the victim's routine. They know the family's finances. The operative is the person who physically executed the plan. They are the one on the porch, the one in the mask, the one who enters the house and does the work. The architect provides the intelligence. The operative provides the nerve. If Tommaso Cioni is the architect, then the question becomes, who in his inner circle has the criminal experience, the physical capability, and the willingness to be the operative? Dominic Evans is the first name that answers every part of that question. And then there is the DUI. Driving under the influence might seem like the least relevant charge on the list, but it tells us something about risk tolerance. A person who drives intoxicated has demonstrated a willingness to put others in danger for their own convenience. They have demonstrated that the fear of consequences does not override their impulses. In behavioral analysis, DUI offenders are statistically more likely to engage in other risk-taking behaviors. It is not the crime itself that matters here. It is what the crime reveals about the person's relationship with consequence. Now, I want to make a broader point about what a criminal record means in the context of the accomplice theory. In my last video, I asked who Tommaso Cioni would turn to if he needed someone to physically execute a plan he had designed. The answer is not a random stranger. It is not a professional from a movie. It is someone he already trusts. Someone who understands the stakes. Someone who has already demonstrated a willingness to cross legal and moral lines. Someone who has experience entering places they are not supposed to be. Every crime teaches the person who commits it something they carry forward. Burglary teaches you how to move through a space that does not belong to you without alerting the people inside. It teaches you how locks work, how doors work, how to manage noise, how to control your breathing and your footsteps in the dark. Robbery teaches you how to confront another person and maintain control of a chaotic situation through intimidation or force. These are not theoretical skills. They are practiced skills. And once you have them, you do not forget them. They sit in your muscle memory the same way a drummer remembers a beat pattern he learned 20 years ago. The FBI has told us what the suspect on Nancy's porch did. He approached in the dark. He knew the camera layout. He disabled it. He entered the home. He confronted an 84-year-old woman. He physically removed her from the residence. He left without triggering a neighbor response. He disposed of evidence along an escape route, and then he vanished. That is not the resume of a first-time offender. That is the resume of someone who has done some version of this before. Maybe not a kidnapping, but entering, confronting, taking. Those are the verbs. And those verbs have appeared before on a Pima County court docket, attached to the name Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. I want to be clear about what is confirmed and what is not. No law enforcement agency has named Dominic Evans as a suspect. The FBI has not publicly connected him to the investigation. The sheriff has not mentioned his name. Everything I am presenting is based on publicly available records, open source reporting, and observable facts. I am not accusing Dominic Evans of any involvement in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. I am showing you why the public is asking questions about him. The FBI has described the suspect seen on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera as a male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10", with an average build, facial hair visible through the mask in the form of a mustache or goatee, and carrying a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack backpack. He was also wearing what appeared to be a belly band holster for a handgun, worn incorrectly over a thick jacket. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent and criminal profiler Jim Clemente told Fox News Digital that he observed what appears to be a marking, possibly a tattoo, visible on the suspect's right wrist in the surveillance footage. Clemente stated that, if it is a tattoo, it could help investigators rule in and rule out potential suspects, and that it could help the public as well. After the FBI released these images and this description, online investigators immediately began comparing the visible features to people in Tommaso Cioni's inner circle. Dominic Evans was the primary focus. Several ex-users noted that Evans has an athletic build and visible facial hair consistent with a dark mustache and goatee. Lips and eyes of the suspect and Dominic are uncanny. Others visited early Black's old music videos and performance footage and identified what appears to be a tattoo on Evans's wrist. Now I need to talk about the limits of this kind of comparison. Comparing still images from a low-resolution doorbell camera to photographs of a person taken in completely different conditions is inherently unreliable. Lighting, angle, compression artifacts, the distortion caused by the mask, all of these factors make definitive visual identification impossible from public footage alone. I am not going to stand here and tell you that the man on the porch is Dominic Evans, based on a side-by-side photograph. That would be irresponsible. But what I can tell you is this: the physical parameters released by the FBI do not exclude Dominic Evans. The height range of 5'9" to 5'10" is consistent with his build. The average build description is consistent. The facial hair is consistent. And the potential wrist tattoo, if confirmed, would narrow the field significantly. Jim Clemente is not a YouTuber speculating in his bedroom. He is a former FBI profiler who spent his career analyzing exactly this kind of evidence. When he says a tattoo could help identify the suspect, he is telling us that the FBI is already looking at this detail. They are already cross-referencing it against known individuals. And here is the detail from the FBI description that has been buried under all the speculation about faces and tattoos. The height, 5'9" to 5'10". In my last video, I presented the fact that Tommaso Cioni appears notably taller than this range, based on publicly available photographs. Multiple investigative journalists who analyzed photos of Tommaso standing next to other people concluded that he exceeds the FBI's height estimate. That was the biggest objection to the theory I presented. If Tommaso is too tall to be the man on the porch, then the Tommaso theory collapses. But it does not collapse if there are two people. It does not collapse if the man on the porch is not the man who planned the crime. And it does not collapse if the man on the porch is 5'9" to 5'10", has an athletic build, has a dark goatee, potentially has a wrist tattoo, and has a criminal record that includes felony burglary. The height discrepancy does not disprove the Tommaso theory. It proves the accomplice theory. It proves that the architect and the operative are two different people. And it points directly at the man who has been standing next to Tommaso Cioni in band photographs for 19 years. Public records associate Dominic Evans with addresses in the broader Tucson and Marana area, with past addresses in Eloy and other parts of Arizona. He was born on February 18, 1978, making him 47 years old. He has lived in the southern Arizona region for most of his adult life. Marana is a community located northwest of Tucson, within easy driving distance of the Catalina Foothills neighborhood where Nancy Guthrie lived. The February 13th SWAT raid that drew national attention was executed at a residence near East Orange Grove Road and North First Avenue, approximately 1.9 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. Social media immediately connected this location to Evans, due to his Marana area address and proximity. However, I need to correct a piece of misinformation that has been circulating widely online. The mother and son detained during the February 13th SWAT operation were not Dominic Evans and his mother. According to ABC News, the individuals detained were Luke Daly, age 37, and his 77-year-old mother. Daly's lawyer, Chris Scalepi, confirmed that his client has served time in state prison on drug-related charges, but reiterated that neither Daly nor his mother were arrested and that they have no link to Nancy Guthrie. A third individual, a DoorDash driver named Carlos Palazuelos, was also detained earlier and released after law enforcement determined he had no connection to the case. So, the SWAT raid was not targeting Dominic Evans. That needs to be stated plainly. But what remains true is the geography. Evans lives in the Tucson-Marana area. Nancy Guthrie lived in the Catalina Foothills. Tommaso and Annie live approximately 4 miles from Nancy. These 3 locations form a tight triangle in the northern Tucson suburbs. If you were planning a crime that required knowledge of the victim's neighborhood, access to the area at unusual hours, and a quick exit route, living within this triangle is not just convenient, it is necessary. There is another geographic detail that deserves attention. Some reports have linked Evans to a property in Rio Rico, Arizona. Rio Rico is a rural community approximately 60 miles south of Tucson, about 16 miles north of the Mexican border, near Nogales. It is remote, it is sparsely populated, and it is the kind of place where someone or something could disappear without attracting attention. The Embassy of Mexico told Fox News that there is no indication Nancy Guthrie is in Mexico. Secretary of Security Omar Garcia Harfuch stated this at a press conference. But the proximity of Rio Rico to the border, combined with Evans's potential connection to that area, has fueled speculation about possible routes out of Tucson for someone trying to move an abducted person. I am not suggesting that Nancy Guthrie was taken to Rio Rico or moved across the border. There is no evidence of that. But in an investigation where the FBI has received over 50,000 tips and has still not located an 84-year-old woman after 3 weeks, every geographic connection to every person in the suspect's inner circle matters. And Dominic Evans has geographic connections that stretch from the immediate vicinity of the crime scene to one of the most remote areas of southern Arizona. Think about the logistics of disappearing a person. You cannot keep someone in a residential neighborhood where every neighbor has a ring camera and the FBI is canvassing door to door. You need somewhere isolated, somewhere rural, somewhere with minimal surveillance and minimal traffic, somewhere where a vehicle arriving in the middle of the night does not trigger a motion sensor or a curious neighbor. Rio Rico, 60 miles south of Tucson, is exactly that kind of place. Large properties, scattered homes, dirt roads that do not appear on Google Street View, a landscape where the desert swallows sound and distance makes witnesses irrelevant. The route from Tucson to Rio Rico follows Interstate 19 south. It is a straight shot through the desert. At 2 in the morning, with no traffic, it takes roughly 50 minutes. If someone left Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood at approximately 2:30 a.m. on February 1st, they could be in Rio Rico by 3:20 a.m. If they then return to the Tucson area, they could be back home by 4:10 a.m. The entire round trip, including time at the destination, fits comfortably inside the window before sunrise. And along that route, every cell tower ping would tell investigators exactly where the vehicle traveled. Which is why, if the person driving that route was not careful, the tower dump data is going to tell this entire story, without a single witness ever having to testify. Now I want to go back to something from the FBI footage that most people have not thought about carefully enough. The door. Nancy Guthrie's home had a front gate in addition to the front door. This is common in Tucson. Desert homes frequently have wrought iron security gates or screen doors in front of the main entry point. They serve as a secondary barrier. In the FBI doorbell footage, the suspect approaches the front door. He reaches out and taps the camera. He then appears to enter the home. But here is the question that no one is asking loudly enough. How did he get through the gate? There is no visible evidence in the released footage of him forcing entry. No prying, no tool use, no kicking. He appears to walk through as though it was already open or had been left unlocked for him. There are two explanations for this. The first is that Nancy did not lock her gate that night. She was 84 years old, living alone, in a quiet neighborhood where she had lived since 1985. It is entirely possible that she simply did not secure the outer barrier. The second explanation is that someone left it accessible for the intruder, someone who had been at the house earlier that evening, someone who knew the gate existed and knew that it needed to be open for the plan to work. If you accept the architect and operative framework, this detail becomes significant. Tommaso Cioni dropped Nancy off at approximately 9:30 to 9:50 p.m. He says he confirmed she was safely inside. But did he also confirm the gate was locked behind him? Did he check the outer door? Or did he leave it in a position that would allow someone else to approach that front door 4 hours later without having to force their way through? The person on that porch did not behave like someone overcoming barriers. He behaved like someone walking through a path that had been cleared for him. And if that path was cleared by someone who was at the house hours earlier, then the operative did not need to be a master locksmith. He just needed to be told which door was open. The Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI have confirmed that 2 separate DNA profiles have been recovered in connection with this case. The first was extracted from a glove found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home in a field near the side of the road. The FBI stated that this glove appears to visually match the gloves worn by the suspect in the doorbell camera footage. The DNA from this glove belongs to an unknown male and does not match Nancy, does not match any family member, and does not match anyone in CODIS, the FBI's national criminal database. The second DNA profile comes from biological evidence recovered inside Nancy Guthrie's home. The Sheriff's Department stated that this evidence is being analyzed at a private lab in Florida, and that DNA profiles are under lab analysis. The Sheriff's Department has confirmed that the DNA profile from the glove does not match the DNA profile from inside the home. They are from 2 different people. 2 DNA profiles, 2 different people, 2 different locations. One on a glove discarded along a potential escape route. One inside the home where an 84-year-old woman was taken from her bed. This is not speculation about whether an accomplice was involved. This is biological evidence that 2 separate individuals contributed genetic material to this crime scene. Former FBI hostage negotiator Chip Massey stated that an accomplice would significantly change the case, adding that the kidnapper would need help to control a hostage, maintain her health, and manage the logistics of keeping someone hidden. Investigators are now pursuing investigative genetic genealogy. This is the same technique used in the Golden State Killer case and the Brian Kohberger case. Even if the suspect has never submitted DNA to a commercial genealogy service, a family member might have. By building family trees from partial matches in publicly available databases, investigators can narrow the search to a specific individual through their relatives. This process takes time, but it has solved cases that were considered unsolvable for decades. Here is what makes the 2 DNA profile findings so devastating for whoever did this. If only one DNA profile had been found, the defense is simple. A lone stranger acted alone. One person, one profile, one crime. But 2 profiles means 2 people to identify, 2 family trees to build, 2 sets of relatives who might have used 23andMe or Ancestry. The chances that neither person has a single family member in any genealogy database drops exponentially with every branch of every family tree. 1 profile is hard to run from. 2 profiles is a mathematical guarantee that at least one of them will eventually lead to a name. And if one of those names turns out to be connected to the man who dropped Nancy Guthrie off 4 hours before she disappeared, or to the man who played drums next to him for 19 years, then every coincidence I laid out in my last video, and every detail I am laying out in this one, stops being a coincidence. It becomes a conspiracy, and the DNA will have proven it. I want to return to the FBI footage one more time, because there is a behavioral detail that takes on new meaning when you view it through the lens of the accomplice theory. The FBI released both video clips and still images from Nancy's doorbell camera. Some analysts, including private investigator Steve Fisher, have raised the possibility that the footage may show two different people at different times during the night. One image shows a person carrying the backpack and holster. Another image appears to show a person in similar clothing, but without the backpack or holster. The build and posture appear subtly different. Fox News reported that this prompted speculation from both experts and online investigators that a second suspect may be visible in the footage. If this is correct, if the footage captures two different people on Nancy's porch at different points during the night, then the two DNA profile finding has visual confirmation. It means the crime was not committed by one person making multiple trips. It was committed by at least two people working in coordination. One may have been responsible for disabling the camera and securing the perimeter. The other may have been responsible for entering the home and removing Nancy. Think about the logistics of taking an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker and limited mobility from her home in the middle of the night. She cannot be rushed. She cannot be thrown over someone's shoulder and carried to a car. She needs to be walked or assisted out of the home, down the driveway, and into a vehicle that is parked at a safe distance to avoid being captured on neighborhood cameras. That process takes time. And during that time, someone needs to be watching. Someone needs to be making sure no neighbor turns on a light, no car drives past, no dog starts barking in the wrong direction. The operative inside the house cannot simultaneously be the lookout outside the house. That requires a second person. Sheriff Nanos told BBC News that he believes Nancy Guthrie was specifically targeted in the apparent abduction. She was not a random victim. Someone chose her. And if you are going to target an elderly woman in her own home, in a quiet neighborhood with minimal street lighting and scattered security cameras, you do not improvise. You plan. You scout. You assign roles. The dress rehearsal on January 23rd, the camera disabling on February 1st, the physical removal of a vulnerable person, the disposal of evidence along a 2-mile route, the complete disappearance of the victim with no trace for 3 weeks. None of this is the work of a single person acting on impulse. And here is where the profile of Dominic Evans becomes relevant again, not because of his face or his build, but because of his skill set. A man with convictions for burglary knows how to enter a structure. A man with convictions for robbery knows how to confront and control another person. A man who has lived in the Tucson area for decades knows the roads, the neighborhoods, the escape routes. A man who has been friends with Tommaso Cioni for 19 years knows the family. And a man whose DNA is presumably on file somewhere in the Arizona criminal justice system would have a very powerful incentive to wear nitrile gloves and a mask if he were going to commit another crime. On February 9th, NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Entin reported that Tommaso Cioni had not been seen publicly in almost a week. Entin stated on the Megyn Kelly show that Cioni was very recognizable with his big beard, and that he had not been spotted at or near the family home since approximately the first week of February. A man goes silent in the middle of the most public investigation in the country. His mother-in-law is missing. The FBI is camped in his neighborhood. News cameras are pointed at his front door around the clock, and he stops being visible. Now, there are perfectly innocent explanations for this. His lawyer may have advised him to stay out of the public eye. The media attention may have become unbearable. He may be staying with friends or family elsewhere. These are all reasonable. But consider the silence in the context of what we know about Dominic Evans. If two people are connected to this crime, and one of them is under intense public scrutiny, while the other is barely being discussed by the mainstream media, the smartest thing the visible person can do is disappear. Not flee, not run. Just stop being available. Stop providing data points. Stop giving reporters footage to analyze and body language experts material to dissect. Every public appearance is a risk. Every photograph is a comparison. Every word is something a lawyer will eventually have to explain. Meanwhile, as of the latest reporting, Dominic Evans has not made any public statement about the case. He has not been interviewed by any media outlet. He has not posted on social media. He has not issued a denial or expressed concern for Nancy Guthrie's well-being. In the age of constant digital presence, where everyone with a phone can make a statement to the world in 30 seconds, his silence is complete. Silence from one person can mean many things. Silence from two people who have known each other for 19 years, who are both connected to the victim's family, and who are both being discussed by the public in the context of a kidnapping investigation. That silence sounds coordinated. It sounds like two people who have been told the same thing by the same person. Do not talk, do not post, do not react. Let the storm pass, and hope the DNA comes back clean. As of today, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 23 days. The investigation has entered what officials describe as a phase of traditional detective work. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has received more than 55,000 calls since February 1st. Over 21,000 tips have come through the FBI's dedicated tip line. 400 investigators have been assigned to the case. The reward for information leading to an arrest or Nancy's whereabouts has reached $200,000 after an anonymous donation. Investigators are working with Walmart to identify who purchased the Ozark Trail backpack worn by the suspect. Sheriff Nanos described this as a significant investigative avenue, saying they can now positively identify the backpack as being sold exclusively at Walmart, and are working with store managers across the state to identify how many units were sold in the last 30 to 60 days, and whether they can track those purchases. They are also tracking the unique holster visible in the footage, taking images to gun stores across the Tucson area. The sheriff described the holster as having pretty unique characteristics. The FBI is also reviewing gun purchases made in the Tucson area within the last year, with agents showing images and names to local gun store owners. They are pursuing genealogical testing on the DNA evidence. They are working with technology companies to attempt to recover additional footage from Nancy's home security system, and they are using a device called a signal sniffer, a Bluetooth tracking tool deployed via helicopter, to search for the signal from Nancy's pacemaker. Savannah Guthrie has posted multiple videos to Instagram, pleading for her mother's return and telling the kidnapper that it is never too late to do the right thing. But behind the public statements, there are signs that the investigation is reaching a critical juncture. ABC News reported that sources with knowledge of the case said investigators are finding their best leads coming up empty. The partial DNA is unidentified. No additional video has been recovered. No vehicle has been associated with the abduction. Sources told ABC News that investigators believe the case will soon have to move into a new phase, with fewer dedicated resources but a small task force focused on it long term. This is the window. The next 2 to 3 weeks will determine whether this case is solved quickly or becomes a years-long investigation. The genealogical DNA results are the key. Retired FBI agent Jason Pack described the process clearly. The private lab finishes the profiles. The profiles go to the sheriff. The FBI uploads them into CODIS. Within a short window, they will know if there is a match. And if there is no match in CODIS, the genealogy databases take over. Family trees, partial matches, branches that narrow to a name. In my last video, I explained how the January 23rd backward walker footage created a second date for investigators to examine. A second night where the suspect was active and potentially sloppy. That theory applies with even greater force to the accomplice framework. If two people were involved in this crime, then the cell tower data becomes twice as powerful. The FBI is not looking for one phone that appeared at the rehearsal site on January 23rd and at the crime scene on February 1st. They are looking for two phones, two devices that might have been in proximity to each other on both nights. Two devices that might have traveled similar routes at similar times. Two devices that might have connected to the same cell towers in sequence. The suspect on January 23rd may have been conducting a solo rehearsal. But if the accomplice theory is correct, it is equally possible that both individuals were present for the dry run. One testing the approach, the other watching from a vehicle parked nearby, monitoring the neighborhood response time, counting the seconds between the camera trigger and the dog barking. A proper dress rehearsal does not just test the performer, it tests the entire production. And here's the problem for whoever did this. You can manufacture an alibi for the night of February 1st. You know the crime is coming. You plan for it. You leave your phone at home. You borrow a car. You create a digital ghost. But January 23rd was supposed to be invisible. Nobody was supposed to know about it. The Ring camera was supposed to miss the backward walker. The dog was not supposed to bark. The homeowner was not supposed to post the footage. Because the suspects believed January 23rd was safe, they almost certainly did not take precautions. Their phones were in their pockets. They drove their own cars. They connected to cell towers along the route. And all of that data is sitting in the records of every telecommunications company that operates towers in the northern Tucson area. If the FBI runs a tower dump for January 23rd and overlays it with cell data from February 1st, and 2 phones appear in both datasets, phones that are registered to 2 individuals who know each other, who live in the same area, who have a 19-year relationship, the case does not just narrow, it closes. Throughout this investigation, multiple ransom-style communications have been sent to media outlets. TMZ received an initial ransom note on February 1st and 2nd, demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin. That note contained a Bitcoin wallet address. A second note followed, then a third, and then a fourth. The fourth email, received on February 16th, stated in part that the sender knows what they saw 5 days ago south of the border, and that they were told to shut up, claiming they know who the kidnapper is, and that it was definitely Nancy. Investigative journalist and former FBI profiler Jim Clemente and ransom expert David Levin both analyzed the communications. Levin noted that the sender said they would not touch an initial $50,000 payment until an arrest is made, at which point they would expect the FBI to deposit the remaining $50,000. The person wrote that they are gambling, both for his safety and his possible freedom. Levin interpreted this language as suggesting the sender may be close to the flame and worried about being implicated themselves. Close to the flame. That phrase has stayed with me. The ransom language does not read like a stranger demanding payment. It reads like someone who is involved at a peripheral level, someone who knows what happened, but was not the one who did it. Someone who is terrified of being connected to the crime, but sees an opportunity to profit from the information they have. In the TMZ tipster's earliest communication, they use the phrase, the main individual, not the kidnapper, not the suspect, the main individual. That is organizational language. It implies a hierarchy. It implies that the sender understands there is more than one person involved, and that one of them is primary and the others are secondary. If you are describing a lone stranger who broke into a house and took a woman, you say the kidnapper or the man or the person who did this. You do not say the main individual unless you understand that the operation has layers. Now consider who might write something like that. Someone close to the flame. Someone who knows the main individual. Someone who is gambling with their own safety because they are worried about being implicated. Does that sound like a random stranger who stumbled across information? Or does that sound like someone on the outer edge of the conspiracy? Someone who was involved enough to know what happened, but not central enough to feel safe. Someone who is watching the investigation close in and is trying to position themselves on the right side of it before the DNA comes back. If the accomplice theory is correct, there may be more than 2 people who know what happened to Nancy Guthrie. There may be people who helped with logistics, people who provided a location, people who were told about the plan after the fact. Every one of those people is now watching the same news coverage you are watching. They are seeing the DNA analysis. They are seeing the genealogy databases. They are seeing the $200,000 reward. And at least one of them has already started talking to the media, even if they are doing it through anonymous emails to TMZ. The ring of people who know the truth about February 1st is wider than one person. And the wider that ring gets, the more likely it is that someone inside it breaks. Before I get to the counter-arguments, I want to address the other coverage of Dominic Evans that has appeared on YouTube and social media, because much of it has been careless. Some channels have presented the SWAT raid on February 13th as though it targeted Dominic Evans. It did not. The individuals detained were Luke Daly and his mother. Evans has not been publicly detained, questioned, or connected to any law enforcement action. Presenting the raid as an Evans story is factually wrong, and it undermines the credibility of everyone covering this case. Some channels have called the gloves found near Nancy's home latex gloves. They are not latex, they are nitrile. The distinction matters because nitrile is what is used in scientific and laboratory settings, which connects to Tommaso's profession. Latex is a completely different material. Getting this wrong shows a lack of basic research. Some channels have presented side-by-side photographs of Evans and the masked suspect, and declared a match as though it were conclusive. It is not. Low-resolution doorbell camera footage, distorted by infrared lighting and partially obscured by a ski mask, cannot be reliably compared to casual photographs taken in completely different conditions. Facial comparison from this kind of evidence requires forensic analysis by trained professionals, not screenshot collages on social media. I am presenting the Dominic Evans connection because the publicly available facts warrant examination. His criminal record, his proximity, his relationship with Tommaso, the physical description match, the 2 DNA profiles, the accomplice theory. These are legitimate data points, but they are not proof. And anyone who tells you they are proof is selling you something other than the truth. If the family is cleared, the argument goes, then Tommaso is cleared. And if Tommaso is cleared, the theory that he directed someone else to commit this crime has no foundation. This is a legitimate counter-argument, and it deserves to be taken seriously. But as I explained in my last video, cleared is an investigative status, not a legal verdict. It means the current evidence does not support charging them. It does not mean new evidence cannot change that status. And in high-profile cases, clearing family members publicly can be a tactical decision designed to reduce pressure on the investigation and potentially make a guilty party lower their guard. There is also the possibility that Dominic Evans is completely uninvolved, that his criminal record is from years ago and has no connection to this crime, that his physical resemblance to the suspect is coincidental, that his friendship with Tommaso is just a friendship and nothing more, and that the real kidnapper is someone whose name has not surfaced yet, someone who is sitting in a database, waiting to be matched by genealogy. This possibility is real, and it should not be dismissed. In my last video, I presented the case for Tommaso Cioni as the architect. In this video, I have presented the case for Dominic Evans as the potential operative. A man with felony convictions for burglary and robbery. A man who fits the FBI's physical description. A man who has been close friends with the victim's son-in-law for 19 years. A man who lives in the immediate area. A man whose band's debut album was called Life, Love, Love, Murder. But I want to close with something that no one else covering this case has said out loud. The reason the Dominic Evans angle matters is not because of his face. It is not because of a wrist tattoo or a side-by-side comparison on social media. It is because he solves the problem. The single biggest problem in the Tommaso Cioni theory. In my last video, the counter-argument that hit the hardest was the height. Tommaso is too tall to be the man on the porch. If that is true, the theory should collapse. But the theory does not collapse because of Dominic Evans. A man the right height, the right build, the right background, the right proximity, the right relationship to the person who dropped Nancy Guthrie off 4 hours before she disappeared. If you remove Dominic Evans from this case, the Tommaso theory has a fatal flaw. If you add him back in, every flaw disappears. That is not proof, but it is a framework. And frameworks are what investigators use to organize evidence until the evidence speaks for itself. The DNA will speak. The genealogy will speak. The cell tower data will speak. And when they do, the framework will either hold or it will shatter. There is one more thing I want you to think about. The reward is now $200,000. That number is not just for a stranger with information. It is for anyone who knows anything. If there is a circle of people who know what happened on the night of January 31st, $200,000 is a number that tests loyalty. It tests friendships. It tests the bond between two men who met through a classified ad in 2007 and played music together for nearly 2 decades. Money has a way of making people reconsider their silence, especially when the alternative is a DNA match that leads federal agents to their front door. I am not telling you he did it. I am telling you that when the DNA results come back, his name is one that the investigation cannot afford to ignore. And if those results connect to anyone in the early black circle, then the album title, the criminal record, the 19-year friendship, the height match, the geographic proximity, all of it stops being coincidence and starts being evidence. The DNA will decide. It always does. And when it does, we will be here. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you stand. Tell me what I missed. Tell me what you think happened on the night of January 31st. Because this community has been ahead of the official investigation from the beginning, and I am not going to stop pulling records until Nancy Guthrie is found. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share this video with anyone following this case. The next update will cover the DNA results the moment they are made public, and that update may change everything. Nancy Guthrie is still out there. She is still alive until someone proves otherwise, and someone, somewhere, knows where she is. I will see you in the next one.